Milestone video edition, we're going to take a look at and review over the Civil War. So remember, there were different causes that led up to the Civil War. The biggest cause being slavery. So remember, the North was anti-slavery and the South had slaves. So remember, the South's economy depended on slavery. So this issue branched off into other issues. So one of the issues that also led to the Civil War was the issue of states' rights. So remember, at this time, the Southern states felt like the federal government had no business in their business. So, which also led to a nullification crisis, which was a dispute over tariffs, which is taxes. So, when you hear the word nullify or see the word nullify, just know that means that states feel like they don't have to follow federal laws. States' rights is basically when states feel like we have the right to not have the federal government in our business. Now, some more causes that led to the Civil War was, of course, the Missouri Compromise. So remember, in Congress, it's very important to have equal representation, especially at this time, because America was not America as it is today with all 50 states. So the slave states or the Southern states wanted to have equal representation in Congress as the free states. So when other states started applying to be a state of America, it came to the whole question of, well, is it going to be a slave state or a free state? So the Missouri Compromise, remember, Missouri and Maine were both admitted to the United States. So Missouri was admitted as a slave state, and then Maine was admitted as a free state. Then came the Compromise of 1850, which again, we're still having tension brewing in American history at this time. So with the Compromise of 1850, California wanted to be a state of America. But unfortunately, or I guess fortunately, depending on how you look at it, there was not a slave state to also give equal representation. But remember, in Congress, the South wanted equal representation as the North. So California was admitted as a free state. So to kind of pacify or plead the South, the North gave the South the Fugitive Slave Act. And remember, the Fugitive Slave Act said if a slave ran from the South to the North, then the North had an obligation to give that slave back to the owner in the South. So the Georgia platform was a document pretty much of Georgia saying, hey, we're not going to break away from the Union just yet because y'all gave us the Fugitive Slave Act. So we're going to temporarily accept the Compromise of 1850. Now, the Dred Scott case was also a tipping point toward the Civil War. Was this man here? Remember Dred Scott? And remember, he was a slave, and his owner moved to a northern state for a few months and then back to a southern state. But Dred Scott felt like, well, if I lived up north for a few months, then therefore I should be a free slave. Of course, the Supreme Court ruled that slaves were property; they had no rights. And then the final thing that really sparked the Civil War was Lincoln winning the election of 1860. Remember, the South thought Lincoln was a threat to their economy because Lincoln was anti-slavery. So, of course, if he's anti-slavery and he's preaching about, not preaching, but he has a stance on ending slavery and the South depends on slaves, then, of course, that, doesn't sit well with them. So South Carolina was the first state to secede from the Union, which means break away from the Union, and then Georgia ended up following in line. Now to the war itself. So we know the Civil War is fought between 1861 and 1865. So remember, in the midst of the war, Abraham Lincoln passed the Emancipation Proclamation, which freed all enslaved people in Confederate states. So only in Confederate states were those slave-holding states. Now, this man here is important because General Sherman, remember him? So he led two campaigns of war tactics. So his first one was Sherman's Atlanta campaign. So remember, the Atlanta campaign was to pretty much destroy Atlanta. Because remember, Atlanta was the centerfold for all things, all the resources, the cotton, economical advantages. For all those, Atlanta was pretty much the centerpiece for pretty much supplying the Civil War. So Sherman wanted to hit them where they hurt, so he hit Atlanta first. And then once he hit Atlanta, he said, you know what, let's keep going. So then he came up with Sherman's March to Sea. And Sherman's March to Sea was pretty much him and his boys went from Atlanta all the way to Savannah and destroyed everything in its sight, buildings, even killing people, burning railroad tracks. You remember railroads were helped move cotton and things around in the Union. I mean, the Confederate States. Everything in this site and in Savannah. By the time they got to that point, they surrendered. And the last thing for the Civil War. Oops, sorry. So remember the Battle of Chickamauga was one of the few battles that was fought in Georgia, the second bloodiest battle of the Civil War. And remember the Union blockade. So remember, you can't fight a war without money. So this cartoon, this anaconda here, pretend these are ships. So the North set up ships to block out, and to block any trade from coming in and out of the South. Because of course, if you can't trade, you can't get money, which means you can't fund the war. So it's also referred to as an anaconda plan. So if you see either one of them on the milestone, the same thing. Then Andersonville prison. So remember, Confederate soldiers or Confederate troops were taking Union soldiers and keeping them here in Andersonville prison, and most of them end up dying because of the harsh conditions of the prison. This man here, Henry Riz, was the commander of the prison, and he ended up getting executed once the Civil War ended due to his harsh treatment of the Union troops that were kept there.